For 15 years, my life was a song written for someone else. I was the harmony, the steady rhythm section, the quiet melody playing underneath his booming solo. His name was David, and I loved him with the kind of fierce, all-consuming devotion that leaves no room for yourself. We met young, two kids with more dreams than money, and we built an empire out of sawdust and ambition. Our business, Artisan's Hearth, wasn't just a company, it was our child. We crafted bespoke furniture, pieces meant to become family heirlooms. I was the heart of the operation. My hands, calloused and stained with varnish, knew the soul of every piece of wood. I could feel the grain, understand its story, and bring it to life. My mornings started before the sun, with the scent of coffee and cedar shavings. I'd be in the workshop, sketching designs, sanding surfaces until they were smooth as glass, my entire being poured into the work. David was the face. He was charming, handsome, the one who could sell a simple oak table as if it were a piece of the king's own court. He handled the clients, the finances, the public-facing glamour of it all. "We're a perfect team," he'd say, kissing the top of my head while I worked late into the night to meet a deadline he'd optimistically promised. I believed him. My world was small and meticulously crafted, just like our furniture. It consisted of the workshop, our small apartment above it, and the tired, happy smiles we exchanged over late-night dinners. I sacrificed everything for that dream. I missed friends' weddings, family gatherings, years of my own life, all because the business needed me. It needed us. My identity was so intertwined with his, with Artisan's Hearth, that I couldn't see where I ended and it began. I wasn't just a woman. I was David's partner, the co-founder, the silent engine. And I thought that was enough. I thought the love we shared, the life we built, was the ultimate reward. The day it all shattered was a crisp autumn evening. We were hosting our annual gala, a celebration of our success. The workshop had been cleared out and transformed with fairy lights and white tablecloths. Our wealthiest clients were there, reporters from design magazines, everyone who mattered in our little world. I felt a rare flicker of pride, looking around at what we had accomplished. I was wearing a simple blue dress, my hands scrubbed clean but still bearing the faint scent of turpentine. David was in his element, a king in his court. He tapped a glass for a speech, and I beamed at him, my heart swelling. I thought he was going to thank the team, thank me. He started by talking about the future, about growth and new horizons. I nodded along, smiling, completely oblivious. And then he said the words. "And that's why I'm so thrilled to announce that Artisan's Hearth is merging with a visionary new partner, one who shares my ambition for the future." He gestured to a woman standing near the front, a sleek, polished architect named Isabella I'd only met in passing. Isabella and I will be taking the company in a bold new direction, rebranding as Hearth and Horizon. A confused murmur went through the crowd. I felt my smile freeze on my face. "We? Merging?" This was the first I was hearing of it. He continued, his voice smooth and confident, never once looking at me. He spoke of new investments, of international expansion, of a future I was clearly not a part of. The air was sucked out of my lungs. He wasn't just announcing a business deal. He was erasing me from our life's work in front of everyone we knew. The final blow came when a reporter asked, "What does this mean for your original partner?" David finally turned his eyes to me. There was no love there, no apology. Only a cold, pitying finality. "She has been an invaluable part of our foundational years," he said, the past tense a knife in my ribs. "But as we evolve, our paths have diverged. We wish her the very best in her future endeavors." He was firing me. From my own company. From my own life. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me. I could feel their stares like physical blows, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and morbid fascination. My face burned with a humiliation so profound it felt like it was scorching me from the inside out. I saw Isabella slip her hand into his. He squeezed it. A public declaration. It wasn't just my business partner, it was my love, my life, the man I had given everything to, standing there holding hands with my replacement. I couldn't breathe. I turned and walked, my legs feeling like they were moving through deep water. I didn't run. I walked with a horrifying, rigid calm out of the workshop, past the beautiful furniture my hands had built, and into the cold night air. The sound of polite applause starting behind me was the sound of my world ending. In that moment, the ground beneath me vanished. It was the deepest pain I had ever felt. If you've ever been through a major deception and understand what it's like to have your heart shattered, please like this video so I know I'm not alone on this journey. The weeks that followed are a gray, formless blur in my memory. I had to leave the apartment above the workshop. It was in the company's name, David's name. I ended up in a tiny, damp basement apartment on the other side of town, the kind with windows that only show you people's feet walking by. The silence was the worst part. For 15 years, my life had been filled with the sounds of creation, the buzz of a saw, the tap of a hammer, David's laughter echoing through the halls. Now, there was only the drip of a leaky faucet and the frantic, looping monologue of my own grief inside my head. I lost everything. The business was legally structured in a way that David, the majority shareholder, had complete control. My name was on the founding documents, but not on the patents, not on the deeds. I was a ghost in my own story. Friends we had shared for years slowly faded away, uncomfortable with the mess, choosing the side with the money and the influence. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. I spent my days in a threadbare bathrobe, staring at a wall, replaying that night over and over. His words, his cold eyes, her triumphant smile. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I felt like a hollowed-out version of a person, a shell left on the beach after the tide has gone out. My savings dwindled at an alarming rate. To survive, I had to take a job at a diner, washing dishes. My hands, once skilled at coaxing beauty from wood, were now perpetually chapped and raw from hot water and harsh soap. It was a new kind of humiliation. People I once knew would sometimes come in. They'd see me in my stained apron, my hair pulled back in a greasy ponytail, and they would look away, a flicker of pity and relief on their faces. Relief that it wasn't them. Each averted gaze was another small death. I was at the absolute bottom, a place so dark I didn't think light could ever penetrate it again. One rainy afternoon, drowning in debt and despair, I was forced to go through the last few boxes of my belongings from the old apartment, looking for anything I could sell. It was a painful archaeological dig through a life that no longer existed. Old photographs of David and me, smiling. A small carving I'd made for him on our first anniversary. It was all ash and dust. Then, at the bottom of the last box, I found it. A simple, sealed wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. It was made of dark cherry wood, smooth and cool to the touch. Around it was a faded silk ribbon, the knot sealed with a wax stamp bearing my mother's initial, an elegant. Tucked under the ribbon was a yellowed envelope. In my mother's graceful script, it said my name and below it, "Do not open until your 33rd birthday." I sank back on my heels, the box feeling heavy in my lap. My mother had passed away when I was 20, just before I got serious with David. She gave this to me on my 20th birthday, a week before she died. "This is for the woman you will become, not the girl you are," she had whispered, her voice weak but firm. 33. That's when a woman truly knows herself. Don't open it a day sooner. Promise me. I had promised. In the whirlwind of building a life with David, I had stored the box away and almost forgotten about it. My 33rd birthday was still 6 months away. For the first time in months, I felt something other than pain. It was a tiny, fragile flicker of curiosity, of hope. This box was a link to a part of me that had nothing to do with David. It was a piece of my mother, a mystery from my past, and a promise for my future. It was a date on a calendar. It was a reason to make it through the next 6 months. Holding that box, I felt a strange sense of purpose. It was a tiny facega, a little spark in the suffocating darkness. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a solution. But it was something to hold on to. And right then, something was infinitely better than nothing. That box became my anchor. The instruction not to open it was, in a strange way, the thing that saved me. It gave me a deadline for my grief. I had to survive until my 33rd birthday. I placed it on the small, wobbly nightstand next to my mattress on the floor. Every morning when I woke up, it was the first thing I saw. Every night when I came home from the diner, exhausted and smelling of grease, it was a silent promise waiting for me. It was a piece of my mother's love, a tangible link to a time when I was whole. I started thinking about her, really thinking about her for the first time in years. David had never been very interested in my past. He was a man focused entirely on the future. But my mother, she was a creator, too. Not of grand furniture, but of small, beautiful things. She made scented soaps, lotions, and candles from the herbs in her garden. Our home had always smelled of lavender and rosemary, of chamomile and mint. She had a small workshop in our basement, a place of bubbling pots and fragrant oils. People in our town loved her creations, not just because they were beautiful, but because they felt personal, made with a certain kind of magic. On a whim, I called my aunt, my mother's sister, asked her if she had any of my mother's old things. A few weeks later, a heavy package arrived. Inside were my mother's handwritten journals, filled with her recipes and notes. The pages were stained and worn, the ink faded in places, but as I read her words, I could almost hear her voice, feel her presence in that bleak little apartment. It was a revelation. I decided to try. I spent what little money I had on basic supplies, a block of lye, some coconut oil, a few essential oils. My first attempts were a disaster. The kitchen of my tiny apartment became a chaotic laboratory of failure. I created batches of soap that were a curdled, ugly mess. I scorched oils, measured ingredients wrong, and more than once, I sat on the floor and cried in frustration, surrounded by the evidence of my incompetence. But then I'd look over at the cherrywood box on my nightstand. 6 months. I had to keep going. I kept reading her journals, deciphering her notes, trying to understand the alchemy she seemed to perform so effortlessly. I wasn't just following recipes. I was connecting with her, with a part of my own history I had neglected. Slowly, painstakingly, something began to shift. I made my first successful batch of lavender soap. It wasn't perfect, but it smelled exactly like my mother's. I held the small, simple bar in my hands and wept, but this time, the tears were different. They weren't tears of loss for David, but tears of reclamation. I had made something. With my own 2 hands, I had created a small piece of beauty out of chaos. I started small. I took a few bars of my soap to a local farmer's market on my day off from the diner. I set up a tiny, rickety table, my heart pounding with fear. People walked by, barely glancing at my humble display. I felt that old, familiar sting of invisibility. Then an older woman stopped. She picked up a bar of the lavender soap and inhaled deeply. Her eyes closed. "Oh," she whispered. This smells like my mother's garden." She looked at me, her eyes shining with tears. "I'll take 4 bars." That was it. My first sale. It was only a few dollars, but it felt like a million. It wasn't just a transaction. It was a connection. My creation, born from my mother's legacy and my own pain, had touched someone. It gave them a memory, a moment of comfort. In that instant, I felt my purpose click back into place. It wasn't about building an empire or making a fortune. It was about this small, human connection. Helping someone feel a little bit better, a little less alone. That first victory fueled me. I quit the diner. I poured all my energy into my new craft. I expanded from soaps to candles, to lotions, to bath salts, all based on my mother's recipes, but with my own emerging style. I created a name for my little business, Ember and Bloom, for the spark I had found and the new life that was growing from it. I built a simple website, took my own photos, and wrote my story. I wrote about my mother, about legacy, about starting over. I didn't mention David. He was part of my past, not my future. The response was slow at first, then it grew. People were drawn to the story, to the authenticity. My products weren't just objects. They were pieces of a journey. Orders started coming in from all over the country. My tiny apartment became a whirlwind of shipping boxes and bubble wrap. I was working harder than I ever had in my life, but this time, it was for me. There was no resentment, only a deep, abiding satisfaction. The day I moved out of that basement apartment and into a small house with a dedicated workshop space was a turning point. It had a small garden where I planted lavender and rosemary just like my mother. My business was growing, my reputation was building. I was no longer the victim, the abandoned partner. I was the founder of Ember and Bloom. I was a survivor. It was right there with my own 2 hands that I started to rewrite my story. I stopped being the victim and became the author of my own destiny. If my journey of overcoming is inspiring you, please subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters and become part of this community of new beginnings. Life settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. My business flourished in a way I could never have imagined. It turned out that in a world of mass-produced goods, people were hungry for something real, something with a soul. Ember and Bloom was featured in blogs, in magazines. I was interviewed about my journey, about the power of heritage and handcrafted quality. I never told the whole, ugly story of my breakup. I just framed it as a change in direction that led me back to my roots. I had no interest in airing my dirty laundry or seeking public sympathy. My success was my statement. And then, inevitably, the past came knocking. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my workshop, pouring a batch of chamomile candles, the air thick with a sweet, calming scent. The bell on the door of my small storefront chimed. I called out, "Be right with you," without looking up. When I did, my heart stopped. It was David. He looked different. Thinner. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a sort of weary uncertainty. His expensive suit seemed to hang off him. He was looking around my shop, at the shelves lined with my products, at the warm, inviting space I had created. "Hello," he said, his voice quiet. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just wiped my hands on my apron, my mind racing. The old me, the frightened, heartbroken girl, would have started shaking or crying or demanding answers. But that girl was gone. I just looked at him, calm and waiting. "You've done well for yourself," he said, gesturing vaguely at my life's work. It wasn't a compliment. It was a statement of disbelief. "I need to talk to you," he said, finally meeting my eyes. We sat at a small table I used for consultations. He told me his story. Hearth and Horizon had been a disaster. Isabella's vision was all about cold, minimalist design that lacked the heart people had loved about our original work. They had overexpanded, taken on too much debt, and their investors had pulled out. The company was on the brink of bankruptcy. He told me all of this with a sense of entitlement, as if his problems were still my problems. And then came the real reason for his visit. "I was thinking," he started, leaning forward, trying to summon his old charm. "What you've built here, it has the soul that Hearth and Horizon is missing. We could merge. We could bring the old brand back, but with your new products. We could be a team again. We were always best as a team." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a profound sense of distance. He hadn't come here to apologize. He hadn't come to acknowledge the pain he had caused. He had come because he was failing and he saw my success as a lifeboat. He wanted to take from me again.
"No," I said.
The word was quiet, but it filled the entire room. He blinked.
"What?"
"Don't be like that. I know you're still angry, but this is a brilliant business opportunity for both of us." "It's not about anger, David," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You didn't come here for us. You came here for you. You destroyed our life's work, you humiliated me, and you left me with nothing. This," I said, gesturing around my shop, "I built this. From nothing. This is mine. The soul you're talking about? That was always me. You just didn't see it. You don't get to have it back now that it's convenient for you." He started to argue, to persuade, to manipulate, but I held up a hand. "The conversation is over. I wish you the best, but my future has no place for you in it. Please leave." He stared at me, seeing for the first time the woman I had become. There was no fight left in him. He stood up, looking small and defeated, and walked out of my shop. As the bell chimed his departure, I felt a final, quiet click. A door closing for good. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was free. The next day was my 33rd birthday. I woke up with the sun, a sense of peace settling over me that I hadn't felt in years. The encounter with David hadn't rattled me. It had solidified me. It was the final test, and I had passed. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my garden, holding the cherrywood box for my mother. It was time. My hands trembled slightly as I untied the faded silk ribbon. The wax seal crumbled under my fingers. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no magical object, no hidden treasure. There were only two things: a thick, sealed manila envelope and a smaller, personal letter in my mother's handwriting. I opened her letter first. "My dearest daughter," it began. If you are reading this, you are 33. I hope you are happy. I hope you are strong. I am writing this because there is something you must know about your past to truly own your future. I loved the man you call your father, but he was not a strong man. He was kind, but he was weak. And when times got hard, his weakness nearly broke me. I found my own strength, and I want you to always be able to find yours. What is in the other envelope is a truth. It may be confusing, it may even hurt a little, but it is not a tragedy.
It is simply a fact.
And facts are things we can build on. Your foundation is not what you think it is. Your foundation is me. And it is stronger than you can ever imagine. Whatever you do in this life, do it with that strength. All my love, Mom. With a deep breath, I opened the manila envelope. Inside was a legal document, an official DNA test result. It listed my name and the name of the man who had raised me, the man I had always called Dad. And next to the definitive field, in stark, black letters, was the result. Probability of paternity, 0%. It wasn't him. My father wasn't my father. I sat there in the morning sun, the papers in my lap, and I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt a sense of clarity. It explained so much. The feeling I always had of being slightly different from my family. The fierce, independent streak my mother always encouraged. The raw strength I had found in myself when I had nothing else to rely on. My mother gave me this truth on this specific birthday because she knew I needed to build my own life first, to know who I was on my own terms, before I could understand my foundation. The box wasn't a key to my future. It was the final piece of my past, delivered at the exact moment I was strong enough to receive it. My legacy wasn't just from her recipes. It was in my blood. It was the legacy of a woman who made her own choices, who was strong enough to stand on her own. Today, I am not defined by the man who left me or by the man who raised me. I am defined by the work of my hands, the business I built from my own ashes, and the quiet, unshakable strength I inherited from my mother. My peace is found in the scent of lavender in my garden, in the satisfaction of a hard day's work, and in the knowledge that I am, entirely and completely, my own. Today, I understand that the wounds of the past don't define who we are, but what we do with them does. I'm so grateful you've listened to my story this far. If it touched you, please share it with someone who might need a little light and leave a comment with a word of strength and hope. Together, we are stronger.